And I will share my screen again. Welcome, welcome. I'm Terry Vanover. This is our Divorce 101 masterclass, workshop, whatever you want to call it. It is how to navigate divorce better, how to get through it. And I'm Terry Vanover, if you don't know me, and I'll explain a little bit about me and what I do and what I'm here for. So I just want to welcome you. Now, I have experienced a devastating divorce myself, and I made all the common mistakes that will leave you emotionally devastated, legally, financially bankrupt. That was me. But I also say, I don't regret it, because it's also the start of my healing journey. It was my road to becoming a better person and helping others to become a better person. And my intention today is to give you the keys that are going to help you navigate this process better with integrity, with dignity, with respect for yourself, your children, and your ex, and give you some tools to help you feel more confident and at peace, even though you are making, I would say, probably the most difficult decisions that you'll ever have to make in your life. Now, I want to just also preface this is not legal advice, and I won't be giving legal advice. I'm not an attorney, hell no. Like when people say, are you an attorney? I'm like, oh, hell no. That is a whole different realm. Although I have, I would say more, extensive knowledge about the divorce process than your average citizen, for sure. I can definitely guide you towards making the right legal decisions and help you along with that. And also understanding like what's typically, relevant in terms of your situation when it comes to legal advice, but we won't be doing that. And even if I had an attorney here today, because I've done many, many workshops with attorneys, they really just can't give legal advice. And those just be generalized advice. So, all right, I'm just going to take 3 nice deep breaths, and I invite you just to do it with me. It's always really good to get grounded and centered, and let's come together in the space together and open up this time for yourself and for each other and for me. And I just thank you for, including me in this journey with you, even just being here with me. I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to take one nice big inhale and exhale. Another nice big inhale. Any thoughts that you have maybe flowing around, you can just let those go and just exhale. And just with each breath, just find yourself getting more centered, more grounded, reconnecting with your body, letting go of any thoughts, any worries, anything like that. Just thoughts will come and go, and let them go. And exhale. Just feel yourself getting grounded and centered. So welcome, welcome. I appreciate you being here. I am worried people are trying to enter the room though, and I'm not going to be able to see them. So I am going to just pause for a second in case anyone has entered. You know how that goes. Someone's in the waiting room for 10 minutes. That would be me. So, if you are, this workshop is for you if you're wanting more confidence through this process. If you are struggling to determine the best path for you moving forward, if you're feeling like you are second guessing yourself, you're not sure, you're wanting more resources and you're wanting more options. If you feel anxious and overwhelmed, this workshop is for you, because I'm going to give you some insights into kind of how to alleviate that. And guess what, y'all? Mindfulness, that's a really great practice. I wish I had discovered meditation long before my divorce, but it's better late than never. So if you don't have some kind of mindfulness practice, you're not taking care of yourself, self-care is really important. Breath work is really good at reducing anxiety and overwhelm. So if you are wanting unbiased soundboard and you want to know if you're doing the right thing and you're ready, willing, and able to take action so that you can move forward, this workshop is for you. You're in the right place. You want to know your options. You want to know, if what your path is. Are there some alternatives out there? And we're going to go over all of that. And I'm going to go a little bit over my story, share a little bit about my background and how I got into doing this. And then we'll kind of get into kind of the biggest mistakes people make and maybe some shifts in your mindset so that you don't make those mistakes like I did. So who am I? Like, who the hell am I? Like, I'm Terry Vanover. And if you haven't heard my accent by now, I don't know. Like, I grew up just a poor country girl in Virginia is where I hail from. And my mom was a single mom. I believe she divorced when I was around 4 or 5 years old. And that divorce was pretty traumatic. My biological father was, I would say, a functioning alcoholic. I remember kind of women coming in and out. I mean, it was just kind of chaos as a youngster, as a young child growing up. And my mom had little education. So we grew up very poor in some trailer out in, I don't know, in the hills of Virginia. So a lot of poverty, a lot of trauma growing up. I was sexually abused when I was 7 years old by a family member. And it really led into my feelings of insecurity as a young woman, a feeling of like not enough. And really, I like to kind of say that I felt unlovable. And when I got married, that's when those feelings really manifested, because I believe, or I know, that we marry our partners trying to resolve those unresolved childhood voids that we didn't get. So I didn't feel lovable. So I expected my husband to fill that void for me. And I was a never-ending pit of love. I couldn't get enough attention. I couldn't get enough love. And I was very controlling. I was very needy. And I also was very lonely when we were married. And the truth is, our marriage did not last very long. And we separated around the same time when my mom divorced. My oldest was 4 or 5 years old. So I just repeated that generational trauma. And, I had to take a lot of the responsibility for our divorce. And during the time of our separation, I was so overwhelmed and so just emotionally checked out. I could not function. I was a basket case. So the decisions that I made during that time were horrendous. And my ex would take some of that blame too. He admits being, really making decisions out of fear as well. And so when people are in that, fear mode, they don't make decisions from their best self. And, we made every mistake, 2 failed mediations, 2 failed attorneys, 2.5 years. I would say $30,000 minimum thrown down the drain, only just to circle back to what we originally had wanted to start with. And I lost my house. I became homeless. My mom died at that time. I got hit by a van. It was just everything that could go down went down, and it just spiraled. Like, that was the darkest time in my life. I became bankrupt because of the decisions I was making during the divorce. So that hurt me financially for many years to come. And so now I'm on a mission to help other people avoid those things. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It was really a really shitty time, but I will say what came out of that, I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't. So although my husband, my ex-husband, I should say, and I at the time hated each other. Like I said, we were not, it was not like that Gwyneth Paltrow conscious uncoupling kind of divorce. It was your typical contentious, nasty divorce. Now we put that all behind us, and we go out together, we celebrate each other. His wife is my bestie, as my teenager calls her. She's like, "Oh, y'all are besties," and she mocks us and makes fun of us. That's okay. And I am remarried to a wonderful man. I just love and adore him, and I spoken all over the country about healing from divorce and avoiding these mistakes. And I've done everything from conferences with attorneys to just, regular citizens who are contemplating divorce. I have co-authored 2 women's empowerment books and, have traveled the country doing some book signings and meeting some amazing people. So divorce can be the beginning of a new chapter. It doesn't mean it's the end. But one of the things that I look back and regret is all the mistakes that I made during that time. And I became very passionate about helping people to avoid those mistakes and learn what not to do to create more conflict, to create more chaos for your kids. I'm still kind of dealing with some of that trauma that my children experienced, and we're still working through that, navigating, talking about it, communicating through it. So it does impact our children, and the more we can show up differently during divorce, the better off we're going to be long term. So the other reason why I really do what I do, and I'm passionate, you're going to hear me talk about, I'm going to sprinkle in, we're going to talk about the logistics of divorce, but I can't talk about the logistics of divorce unless I also talk about like healing from what caused the divorce. Because what I'm also passionate about is preventing future divorce. And I'm not pro-divorce, I'm actually pro-healthy relationships. And when we start to work on ourselves and understand what went wrong in the marriage and where we, are showing up incorrectly in the marriage, or we're not being our authentic self, or we're projecting onto our partners, the better our relationships become. And second marriages, their divorce rate is 70%. So the fact is, that like statistic, I just want to take a moment, and that was pre-COVID. So I would wonder what the statistic is now, because the divorce rates did go up during COVID and post-COVID. So the truth is, like, we can blame the partner, but the truth is you're going to bring that baggage into your next relationship, and it is going to take a toll. If you've got a high conflict ex, that's going to impact the blending of the family. And now not only do you have spouse and one spouse to deal with, but you got ex-spouses to deal with too. Like I said, it takes a lot. I know, I think maybe people have this perception that it's easy the way the 4 parents navigate everything, but we don't always agree. It's not always perfect. And we do check our egos and always like have an intention and always make sure that our kids are at the forefront of every mistake, every decision that we're making. So it is really, it's doable. And I will say, I think that having a relationship like my ex-husband and I, it's not possible in every situation, but it's more possible than people think it is. I think if we can let go of some things, restructure how we communicate with our exes, we can really change things. Because divorce, y'all, does not mean the end of your relationship with your spouse. If you've got kids, you have to co-create a new relationship, a new co-parenting relationship. And I think that's the biggest mistake that people make. And I actually really love it when people come to me and they're still married and they're contemplating divorce, because here's the thing: if you've got communication issues during the marriage, you're going to have those communication issues during the divorce, but there's going to be less chance that people are going to be working on it because they're no longer together. There are some things that if you work on your own, despite what the ex is doing, it is going to shift your divorce into a trajectory that is more positive, more constructive, more respectful. Promise. It's true. It's true. You don't need to have 2 people both, doing this or in it for the gold. I mean, it really is, a relationship is a dynamic. And if one of you shifts the dynamic, the other person responds. So it is definitely possible. All right. So what are you going to get by the end of this workshop today? So you are going to gain tools to navigate this process more confidently. You're going to learn how to find resources and knowledge. You're going to understand what guidance you need to move forward. And I'm also going to share some more things of like what I do in this process and what my role is that's going to help you from this. And again, shift your thinking from a negative to more constructive and a more expansive way of thinking. Because oftentimes, again, like I said, when I was going through my divorce, I was in such emotional distress. I was not thinking from that long-term picture, from that expansive self. I was thinking just from like, it was really survival mode. And eventually this will be over and we have to be in a thriving mode and we have to think from that position. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing in the chat, what is your biggest challenge? What is your biggest issue? And I'll try to kind of maybe talk about that a little bit as we move forward. What are you hoping to gain? What insights would you like to have? So if you wouldn't mind, maybe in the chat box, just saying, what is your biggest challenge? What's your biggest issue? What do you need from this workshop? What are you hoping to gain? Are we going to be quiet? We're not going to tell me? Oh, no one wants to chat today? Okay. Does anyone want to just go on audio and just tell me in case there's something you want to walk away with? You don't have to, obviously.
Oh, I was,
okay.
yeah, sure. I'll go. So I was divorced, finalized in March 2017. And one of the things, I have a number of things that I wrote down to talk about. But one of my issues is that every year we go back to court. Mm-hmm. Every year there's something else. And I've really pleaded with her about, it says in our divorce papers that we try mediation. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like currently my concern is, my relationship with her at best is, let's say, no profanity. That's mm-hmm. usually a good conversation.
Okay.
So, she's done everything from threaten me physically in front of my house, to I'm going to get you. And we get into the courtroom, she'll start crying. And then the judge will just let her have basically whatever she needs. So like a real brass tacks here.
Yeah. Okay. So I get it. So she's kind of playing the system. And so what I'm hearing is like, you want to stop this pattern. Okay. So that's a really great, okay. So I have some things to talk about that because I do address that. And I do have clients who have a high conflict ex. And that's one of the things we do is like how to handle high conflict exes, reduce the conflict, reduce the tension, reduce this back and forth. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, I'll share a story with you. All right. That goes right along with that. All right. So one of the things I think that people make, and it sounds like your Ed's, ex-wife is relying too much on an attorney. It sounds like it's a control issue for her. And so a lot of times people in a divorce rely too much on an attorney rather than doing some homework, doing some legwork on their own, or not knowing what their alternatives are, what they can do. The truth is the system, I'm just going to be honest because I'm not in the system, so I can speak frankly about it. The system is designed to feed off of conflict. So if you go into this system knowing that's a different intention than having two people who are trying to work it out and doing what's best for the children. So if there are some ways that you can avoid that, that's always better. And I was speaking with someone just this week, and sometimes people go out because their sisters told them to do this, or someone's told them to do that. Like, go and hire this bulldog attorney before she does, right? They go out and do this. And all that does is amplify the fear, the contentiousness and all that stuff, because you're adding to the conflict. So there's some things that you want to know before you would hire an attorney, and some things that you could do to avoid getting into a traditional litigated divorce, which is what most people think of when they think of divorce. But there are other options, there's other things, there's other ways to navigate it. And sometimes we think, oh, if I go out and hire an attorney first, it puts me at a better advantage and But sometimes that ramps up the conflict. And then it becomes like the spouse then says, okay, if they want to play hardball, this is how we're going to play. And so then instead of like working together to negotiate, then you're on opposites. And again, the system is designed to feed off of conflict. The more you disagree, the more the system benefits, but not families. The families don't benefit from this. The kids don't benefit from this. And you don't want strangers making decisions about your kids and your family. So I'm going to tell some stories of like clients who've been able to like do some really alternative like things that has worked out for their families. And had they done the traditional litigated route, it would not have happened. So another mistake that I see people making is listening to family and friends. Yeah, and that was another thing. This woman was like this that I talked to this week, like super, super smart. Like she had like a much better head on her shoulders than most people, 99% of the people. Because she's like, look, my family keeps telling me to do this and this and this. And I know that's just not where I'm at. And, people telling you to take them for all they're worth or take all their money. And like, that's not realistic, number one. And, you have to shift your mindset around divorce to like, unfortunately, you have to think of it like a business deal. You guys are now splitting parenting time, putting those kids first. And now you're thinking about what's the best way to divide the assets that's fair. So listening to family and friends, they love you, but they are not unbiased. they have a bias here, and the courts will not. And they also will not know what's best for you and your kids and what works best. So listening to family and friends, although they mean well and they love you, tell them what you need. I just need a listening ear. I don't really need your advice. They're not. And let me tell you, what an attorney that works well for one situation does not necessarily work well for someone else's situation. There's many, many factors, so many factors into choosing the right attorney, choosing the right process, and all those things. So it's knowing that is very, very key to getting through this. So mistake number 3, y'all, is not knowing your options and resources. So this is where I'm going to raise my hand and say, dummy over here. I held on to my home for way too long and ended up in, bankruptcy, and kind of just, again, I didn't know that there were other resources that I could have talked to, like financial advisors or mortgage brokers to help me refinance, like all this stuff that I didn't know. Now I know, of course, looking back at it. And you know what, honestly, looking back at it at the time, I think, because I don't live in that house, obviously I live quite a bit away, I would have loved to have someone like me, a divorce strategist on my team saying, why are you holding on to this house? Like, what is it about? What is it? Because for me, it symbolized that financial security. And then of course that ended up like, it symbolized that, but the truth was it really wasn't. And I had worked 45 minutes away. And the reason why we had stayed in that home was because my ex-husband at the time worked closer to the city. So for me, it wasn't even like a really good overall decision as far as would have been much more beneficial for me to move closer to my job at the time. And, definitely financially, I should have like thought about like, let me look at some options to refinance, or what can I do in this situation? And I just did not know what I could have done in that time, because there was no one on the outside saying, hey, T, you should really talk to this person, or maybe think about this, think about long term. In 5 years, do you really want to be in this house? Because you work 45 minutes away. Do you really want to be commuting your kids back and forth? So there were some things I wish I had thought about differently during that time, for sure. Now, another thing is, if you are in your home right now, oh, and you know what? Hang on just a second. I'm making myself. So if you see me looking down, that's because I'm like a huge like writer. I look to write everything I do and say down, everything y'all are saying, I write down. What I would invite you guys to do, if you're still in the home, if you're considering divorce, it's really important that you make a copy of all your financial documents, get all your tax statements from the last 3 years, get a copy of the mortgage, get a copy of pay stubs, retirement accounts and things like that. You want to have a really good standing of like where you are financially, because you want to know, you want to be making decisions from that financial standpoint that make sense. You know, again, I didn't do any of this. I had no clue. And so that's one of the things also that will keep things down, because if you have to go to court and you have to like force your ex to give you certain information and stuff like that because they're hiding assets and things like that, then that again, that ramps up that money and legal fees and all that stuff. So the more knowledgeable you are before the process begins, the better you're going to be. So someone is texting, hey, I have a how to divorce a very high conflict person. Yeah. So I am going to talk about that because I do deal with this. And so it is hard to, I'm not going to pretend like it's easy to divorce a high conflict person. But, you know, there are some things that you can do to keep the conflict down and understand what is a threat and what is a, you know, empty threat. So there are some things that you can know and do and avoid. And a big part of what I do is helping people to understand their options with the high conflict ex and communicate in a way that will decrease the conflict with a high conflict person. And so there are some things you can do to avoid ramping up the conflict. And again, when you're in that state of mind of fear and like they threaten you and they are, you know, saying they're going to do this, this, and that, sometimes you need that sounding board and someone to ground you and say, let me just tell you the reality. If he wants to go this route and go to court, the reality is, you know, 99.9% of the time that doesn't happen. Blah, blah, blah. So sometimes just having someone to kind of help you keep things in perspective is really, really helpful. So, and that kind of goes into my next slide, which is mistake number 4, allowing your emotions to cloud the judgment. And I would say that is the number one mistake that people make, really. That's the number one reason why divorces are so nasty, so bitter. They don't have to be. And again, one person can totally shift the trajectory of how the divorce is going. And I've seen it time and time and time and time again. Because if you know what their hot buttons are, you know what their triggers are, and you know how to avoid it, and you know how to like capitalize upon what their issues are in a good way and stay on that constructive end of things, it makes a huge difference. But again, just like, you know, and in the same way with the person who was chatting in our chat box about the high conflict ex, at the time, my ex was like making threats against me too, I'll be honest with you. So now looking back, those threats were made out of fear, all kinds of things, like not violence or anything like that, but just kind of, you know, just when people are divorcing, they go to that like fight mode and they start, fighting, and they don't really think about the big picture. And there's some things that we can do, keep things calm, to keep things rational. And also patterns, if you're aware of, you can shift those patterns or avoid those patterns or recognize, oh, when this is going on, this is what I should do. So becoming aware of the patterns is key to shifting things around too, with like a high conflict X. So one of the things I'd invite you to do, I'm trying to think where, I was going to tell you about one of my stories of one of my clients, but one of the things that, like, I think right now is a good time to talk about this, but if you have a high conflict person, okay, first off, I don't use labels, and I do have clients that have what I would call high conflict, but I'm not jumping on this bandwagon of saying narcissism and stuff like that. When we start labeling people and we start hammering into a filter, it prevents us from seeing things from a bigger perspective. So it's really important that you look for those opportunities when you guys are working together and when you are moving towards the goal, because we don't want to get locked into like, he never does this, or he's always doing that, or she's always this, or she's so controlling, or we want to kind of let go of the labels, because we want to be looking at this from a place of expansiveness and long term. And we want to use opportunities where you are working together to try to build on those. So we want to kind of look forward in those places rather than honing in on all the negative stuff. So what I would invite you to do is ask yourself, if this divorce were to last forever, because it'll be longer than you think it will be, what quality would have to emerge in order for me to rise above it? If this divorce were to last forever, what quality would have to emerge in me in order for me to rise above it? Just knowing that and kind of staying to that, and just like staying grounded and staying, okay, you know what? I need to be like resourceful through this. Or, you know what? I need to just stay at peace and stay calm, because he knows how to trigger me and push my buttons and get me all overwhelmed. And I guarantee you, unfortunately, a lot of divorces are longer than most people think. So the more you develop these calming qualities, these higher self qualities, the better you're going to get through this process. Again, I'm not saying it's an easy process. Been there, done that, got the divorce t-shirt. I understand. But I also know that I was in such a low place and such a mindset of like me, and not like I look back and I like, oh, there were opportunities that I missed that if we had like seized upon could have ended that divorce so much earlier and so much better. Hindsight is 2020. And my goal for you is to look back at the worst time in your life and think to yourself, wow, I handled myself with such grace and dignity. I'm really proud of how I handled myself, despite that being the worst event in my life. So I want you to kind of just take a moment and just think about, what do I need to develop in myself to get through this? What to rise above it, be my best. So again, looking at your role in this process, where are you being high conflict? Where are you not negotiating? Where are you digging in your heels and not like maybe looking for opportunities to come to an agreement? So accepting responsibility for what you're doing in the relationship will be really the key, because when you kind of step back and you go, oh, okay, I missed that, or, oh, she triggered me and then I responded really nasty and the tension grew and then and then the communication fell apart. So when you kind of like accept responsibility for like your role in things, you can start to shift things. You take back your power. You're no longer a victim. And that was my whole issue in this whole thing. I was like a victim. I was a victim of the attorney who wasn't doing what I wanted. I was a victim of my ex-husband. I was a victim of the bank because they were, you know, not working with me and blah, blah, blah. If I had just kind of stepped back and realized, hey, you're not really, you know, you need to kind of start coming out of this and start asking more questions and start talking to more divorce professionals who can help guide you through this. That would have been way better. Because when you blame others, you're giving up your power. And so let me tell you about my client, Max, because he goes with a lot of what y'all are saying. She was very high conflict. And again, I do not label people. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not diagnosing anyone, and none of us are either, I don't think, on here. So it's not our job to do that. Our job is to figure out, like, how can we negotiate with this person to make the best for our children or for our long-term goals, right? So Max came to me, and again, I suspect that there were some pretty, you know, she had some kind of, I would say there were some really strong tendencies in how she behaved and acted. But the good news was, because he worked on himself and not being triggered by her so much, he would often just step back and know, okay, our community, you know, and they had a goal. They really did. They had a goal of, like, not doing the traditional litigated route. And he also looked at, like, what are her triggers? And so knowing what her triggers are allowed him to, like, avoid them, but use them. I don't want to say use them, but to kind of, like, capitalize on, oh, she really has a fear of money and security. And I want to make sure that I keep relaying our communication to her that you will be secure and, you know, you will be financially secure and blah, 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 if we do this, this, and this. So him knowing that, kind of stepping back and realizing what were her goals and what was important to her, allowed him to keep the communication flowing with her. Also, a really interesting pattern that she had, and maybe you guys know this with your high conflict ex, is, like, oftentimes he would broach a subject that he knew would, like, trigger her. And so he kind of, like, would, you know, send a text and just kind of just step back. And so once he recognized the pattern of, if it triggered her, it would be barrage, 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 barrage. I mean, just nastiness coming back at him. But here's what he learned. If he did not react and he didn't do anything for, like, 24 to 48 hours, for whatever reason, this was her pattern, he could just kind of come back in like a sad way. We learned how did this pattern work and broach it differently. And she was, like, prepared for it. We called it kind of like dropping the bomb. He'd kind of just drop the bomb and just, like, walk away and not respond. But before he started working with me, he'd say something, and it would, you know, at the time he didn't know, like, this is going to make her flip out. And then she, you know, respond with, like, all this nastiness. And he felt this need to justify back to her. So that's another thing. If you're dealing with a high conflict, you have to watch out for Jade, justifying, arguing, defending, explaining yourself. If you're getting into that, that's not a good dynamic. So what he realized was, like, okay, I just need to just step back and not even say anything. And then when she had calmed down, we could have a level-headed conversation about it. But he knew that that initial reaction was going to be super negative and it would super flip her out. And so they broke that pattern, and they negotiated the entire divorce on their own. They did have to use, like, a business attorney because they owned a business together. But other than that, I mean, they were able to stay out of the courts and stay out of that because, you know, again, he knew what his goal was and he knew what her goal was. And so he would kind of keep going back. Okay, she wants this, and we want to keep bringing it towards that. And we're working towards that goal for her. And it was beneficial for him. So there are some things that you can do that can really shift the dynamics of even working with a high conflict person. I mean, once you recognize their triggers, once you recognize your triggers, even more importantly, and break the patterns, then you can shift things around. It's so possible. And so I talk about the healing part of this. You can't, because, even with Max, with his whole thing was not feeling accepted was his thing. Now I'm using James in this example, but just to get back to Max, it was him not feeling acceptable and wanted. And when she pushed him away in that initial trigger, he felt that need to like explain and justify himself. And like, I just want you to hear me. And, and when he recognized he was doing that, and again, this goes back to our youth, our childhood, there's a part of us that, wants to be seen, wants to be heard, wants to be acknowledged, wants to be loved, feel like we matter, whatever that is. And when we don't recognize how that's showing up in our relationships, it can derail things. So because he realized that and he worked on that, he could let go of that and know, okay, it's okay. I don't need her to see my point of view. I don't need that anymore from her. So because there was still that internal struggle with her to get her to understand him and see his point of view. He did, he wanted to be, I call them the nice guys. There's a lot of nice guys, people pleasers. They don't want to make people mad. They just, they don't want to not be liked. But the truth was, when we worked on him and him loving and accepting and liking himself, it didn't matter whether anyone else liked, and especially his ex-wife, even though, we think like, oh, I don't care if she likes me anymore. But we do to a certain degree, especially when you're, untangling and uncoupling, So another mind shift that you need to think about as you're moving forward is making decisions from your future self. You need to have one of the first journaling exercises I give my clients is a vision statement, because you don't want to think from that spot of where you are, because you're in survival mode. You're in like fear and scarcity mindset. You're all in those kind of mindsets. And you need to be making decisions from that future self and where you want to be. Firstly, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because if you're making decisions from the here and now, you need to take in, just from a practical standpoint, you need to take in like, well, inflation might go up, or, things are going to change. And so I need to be thinking about not just now, because I've seen where people, when they're making their marital settlement agreement and they've crunched all the numbers, right? And they're like, okay, I can pay the mortgage. And that's kind of what I did when I was doing that. Was thinking, okay, I can do this. But there was not the mindset of like, okay, well, what if the furnace breaks and you need $5,000? You have no savings because the financial agreement that you've agreed to is so constrained that there's no room to breathe. And so you want to be thinking from that 3, 5, 10 years from now and making decisions from your thriving self and not from that scarcity and fear mindset. So like I said, one of the things that I, talk to people is like, okay, we need a vision statement, and we need to talk about your goals, and we need to talk about your negotiables versus your non-negotiables. What are your nice to have? Don't really care about. So we, sit down and we talk about all those things, and we set out a plan of like what's important and what's not, and what fits into that future vision that you have of your life. Very important. And then I had a client, Alex, when he came to me, he was in the throes of like his wife had cheated on him, and he was like just struggling, and so oftentimes when people are in so much pain and so much hurt, they want to hurt and put the other person in pain, and they're not thinking from like a business standpoint of 5 years out, when this relationship is all gone and you've moved on and she's moved on, what do you want for you and those kids? And, again, I helped him work on forgiveness and letting go of betrayal and, betrayal trauma and all that stuff, but also him developing a plan that avoided like a traditional litigated divorce, using some mediation, using some other things, thinking outside of the box to come up with something that she could be happy with spousal support, and he could be happy with as well. So, I mean, it's hard sometimes. It's hard when you're in the midst of it, and you're grieving, and you've been so hurt and so betrayed. And of course, people are in your ear telling you, take him for everything he's worth, do this, do that, because they're hurt too. They love you and they hate seeing you hurt. But the truth is, we have to think from a broader perspective. And if the judge had come in, had made those decisions, it might not have been the right decision for them. Certainly, it wouldn't have set them up for future term goals. And he said, this is what he told me, he thinks he saved $23,000 during his divorce because he kept the emotions out, and they thought of alternative ways to negotiate what their goals were. They kind of came to a nice little, middle ground. Because the truth is, y'all, and this is another hard truth of divorce. Divorce is a lose, lose, lose situation. So he knew he was going to lose, this certain amount financially, and she knew she was going to lose out this certain amount. But he wanted to try to mitigate that loss as much as possible and come up with, so, if you get into this, I want to take everything and I want to win everything. It's just figuring out what is more important for you and what's more important for your spouse or ex-spouse, and how you two can get what you want along the way. But it is a lose-lose situation. You may not get all the parenting time. Your spouse is likely to get parenting time. That's a reality. And you have to kind of accept that. You have to accept that your situation is going to change, that financially things might not be like they are right now. You're not going to live the lifestyle that you're living right now. And that was, again, like a big part of my problem, just the denial of my situation of like, oh, maybe this mortgage is not really practical for a single mom of two. Maybe I need to be thinking about some alternatives and accept my situation, rather than I call myself an like, what do you call it? Ostrich. I just buried my head in the sand and just didn't really kind of accept reality of what was going on. And if you get into the my way or the highway, you either do it my way or the highway mentality, and you don't think creatively towards a solution, you're gonna end up with maybe something you don't want at all. And here's a really good example. My client Janet had an interesting situation. It wasn't so much. It was around parenting time, and they shared one son, and it was just for her coming up with something that she was comfortable with, And I wouldn't say her ex was high conflict necessarily, but they really struggled with that parenting time of coming up with a solution. And believe it or not, we came up with a really creative custody solution that allowed him like some unsupervised visits to where she felt comfortable. And it was a really interesting creative solution of how I don't want to get into logistics of it. But it was really interesting how when you think outside the box and you think from a perspective of expansiveness, how can he get the visitation he wants, or she get what, the money she wants, but I also get what I need and what I want. And like, what are some creative solutions to this? How you can come up with some things. And so you need to be thinking, you need to accept that things are going to change and that you're not going to win it all. And that, it's just unlikely to happen. But think of like creative solutions and think outside the box. on some things. And so again, this is where I'm saying that if you go the traditional route and you get in front of a judge, they're not going to sit there and go, oh, you should do this and this. That's not how that works. And a lot of people are really shocked and devastated when they get in front of court. I didn't have my day in court. There's no day in the court. It's like wham, bam, hit the gavel, move on. It's just, and again, courts are slow, and their process is based on precedent, right? So, it's a slow moving process, and it's based on old stuff and old ways of thinking, rather than thinking like new alternative ways of thinking and more modern approaches to things. So and again, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's absolutely necessary. I get that. But there's some ways to navigate that process that are better, and that you can present yourself better in front of divorce professionals and in front of judges. So besides, Alex gave me a wonderful, beautiful testimonial, and now he's dating again and happy, and it's good to hear. He's got really great things to say. But here's some other testimonials from other people that I've worked with. Whoops, I'm sorry, I went way over. I'm deserving of a person in my life that understands that I'm not perfect. I'm deserving of a love that wants to work through issues rather than not just focus on what's right in front of them. And I learned this from Terry Vanover. And then, like I said, Alex saved $23,000 on his divorce. I didn't include my Max testimonial. I need to get that in here. Because I'm really proud of how he navigated this divorce, and was really did a lot of work to make it really great for his son. And then my divorce was granted. Thank you once again for all your help through this process. So I love helping people avoid the mistakes that can lead down that dark road. So what the hell does a divorce strategist do? A divorce strategist will help you create and execute your plan to reach your goals. Like I said, you want to be making these decisions for your life and for your kids, because you're the one that should be in control. Stay true to your goals during duress, because it is really easy for other people to manipulate you, for the process to manipulate you. I would say my attorney didn't keep to my goals at all. Did a bunch of stuff that I look back now and go, oh my God, really ran me over. Make clear and sound decisions during this most difficult time of your life. You want to make sure that the decisions you're making now set you up for a better future. Don't do what I did. Find resilience and strength to overcome the overwhelm. I know how overwhelming this time is. My anxiety during this was through the roof. I could barely function. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I almost lost my job. So I know how devastating this is. And I want to teach you how to heal the baggage that you have, so that you can hit the ground running. I want you to hit this next chapter ready to roll, so that you don't make these mistakes again. And also develop better communication skills with both your ex and your divorce professionals, so that you come across as best as possible. Sometimes people don't understand how they're coming across to other divorce professionals. Oh, that reminds me of one of my clients. He sent me an email because he goes, I don't understand why she's mad at me. She says I'm condescending and da 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 da. And I was like, oh, I get it. So someone on the outside looking in, I get what he was saying, and I knew what he meant. He was trying to be like super nice, but that super niceness was coming across as like condescending to her. And so what I taught him was BIFF, right? That's what you do. Brief, informative, friendly, but firm. You don't overdo it. You don't over-explain. You don't do all that. There's a certain way that you should be communicating that are going to keep you, communicating, so it can't be misconstrued, and it can't be looked at it a different way, or, and it helps to have someone on the outside preparing you and guiding you through the process. And I think you just missed what I said about that BIF. That is something that there are some really great resources out there for high conflict divorces that can keep the conflict down, but also make sure that you are presenting yourself to divorce professionals in a way that is clear and shows, oh, okay, they are coming at this with just clear-headedness and respect and integrity and stuff like, because sometimes people don't understand how they might be coming across to others. And BIF is a way that Dr. Bill Eadie developed this kind of communication. He's both an attorney and a therapist. And so he developed this way of communicating: brief, informative, friendly, and firm. If you're making sure you're sticking to those guidelines, that really helps you come across in what you need. So you want someone to help you prepare you, guide you through the process, know your options, assist you with getting the resources and information so that you're knowledgeable, be a sounding board for you. Like, does this sound like right? Is this aligning with my goals? And helps you to understand the pitfalls and avoid the mistakes. So that's what I did with my client when he sent me that email. And I was like, oh yeah, you are just, it's, of course, because she's got that emotional stake in it, she's going to read it like this. So instead, say it like this, this, and this. So you want to understand how you might be unknowingly making mistakes that are going to lead you down a path of like destruction. And so you want to educate you on being respectful. And like a big part of what I do is, if you've got kids, you're going to have to learn how to communicate with this person. If the relationship's not over, you're still going to have this person in your life, obviously not in the same capacity, but in a certain way, it can actually be worse, because now there's nothing at stake. Now there's no, okay, now we're not married. Now I really don't have to try to get along with you. But the truth is, people lose sight that you have kids. You still need to try to be respectful and have a constructive co-parenting relationship. And I have done that. I have done that with one of my clients, Linda. She came to me right after this super, super high conflict divorce. And it was for, like, really just totally honest with you, it was for emotional healing. She needed to let go of this baggage. She needed to stop every time he showed up at her house. It was always like a negative, tense exchange, and she would just melt and cry and be a ball. And now they have gotten past that. They are hanging out, taking their son together to the zoo and doing things together. And she said to me, my God, I wish I had found you when we were married, because I think things would have changed. I was like, yeah, I think so too. I think if we had, once you let go of all the preconceived notions and all the filters and all that baggage, and you walk away from that, you can totally create a healthy relationship, at least a respectful one. Not always. It's not, I'm not saying, and in some situations you shouldn't have a relationship with certain people. Like my client Max, I would, they have clear boundaries, very clear, healthy boundaries. They should not be hanging out together. I think it's best for him to cut away and be on his own and have as little contact as possible with her. But do they have a constructive co-parenting relationship? Absolutely. So, I just think it's amazing. So I'd love to invite y'all to a one-on-one session with me, because this is just a workshop and we're just kind of talking about in generalities. But I've set aside 2 complimentary phone sessions where I'm, speaking with individuals, where you will learn the 3 steps to overcome the divorce overwhelm for your particular situation. And I will help you learn how to identify a strategy so you feel confident again, let go of your negative triggers from your ex so that you can achieve your goals faster through this, and give you some strategies to avoid unnecessary conflict. So I'm going to set the, I know, I feel like I'm talking fast. Everyone thinks Southerners talk slow. I do not. They do not. They talk really fast. Oh my God, I'm so funny. All right, so I'm just going to put my link so y'all can contact me, you know, individually. Of course, you can send me you can send me a message, you can find me on Facebook, you can send me an email, whatever you need. But there's my link to set up some time on the calendar directly so that we can talk about your individual situations. So tell me, y'all, what was your biggest takeaway from this workshop today?
Hi, this is Stephanie. I'll go ahead and go.
Okay.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is I'm divorcing somebody this divorce is very high conflict. And I'm the one that's going to be paying everything out. And what I've learned is we had a breakdown of communication in our marriage, which was one of the main reasons why we divorced. And realizing, because I actually have a restraining order against him, which is going to be challenging to try to communicate with him because I can't. But just the triggers, just the fact that things are being done on his end that triggers me. And just me realizing, okay, he's got to have some triggers, and just realizing, don't try to push him. Don't try to push his buttons. Don't try to upset him. Even though I'm not dealing with him, we're going through attorneys, but the end result from what I'm hearing from your session is it's a business deal. And it's take the personal out of it. As much as I can't stand the guy, this is a business transaction. Even though I'm the one that's paying everything out and whatever it is, just realize that he's no longer my husband. And I just got to move forward with it, with the mindset that I got to communicate, even though it's through attorneys, but just it's business.
Right.
It's hard. It's not going to be easy.
No.
I think it's going to be drawn out, but I think it's changing my mindset, like you said.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, let me tell you, I'll just be totally honest with you. If Linda had told me a year ago that we would be sitting here and we'd be having sessions on, you know, their like trips together and stuff, I would be like, y'all are doing what? Because it was very, very high conflict. It really was. But I do believe there's hope. And again, you know, if you had told me this in my divorce, I would have looked like you had three heads, like, I hate the guy, he hates me. But like you're saying stuff, he's got his triggers, he's in fear mode, you're in fear mode. How can we rise above it? What can we monopolize on? Like where are we seeing opportunities to get this moving forward and get this on a constructive path, for sure. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Yeah. And unfortunately, people don't want to look at this as a business deal. And so they're also devastated when they get into, so here's the thing, here's the biggest mistake that people make. There's so many mistakes. People don't get that they want to use the legal system to get them the emotional justice. They're using the legal system to try to get emotional justice, and the two don't go together. So the sooner you accept that and realize, oh, she cheated on me, I'm going to make her pay, and that's not going to happen. That's not how that happens, and that's not how that works. The sooner you accept that and like, okay, so the reality is we got to look at like how to deal with our assets from a business standpoint and get all the emotional healing elsewhere, like with me. Okay, good. That was a great takeaway. Any other takeaways? And I would love it too if y'all want to share any takeaways or your ahas in the groups as well, in the Facebook groups. Just say, hey, I was in the workshop, I learned this, this, and this, so that other people will join our workshops and gain information and knowledge too. Well, I have put my link in the chat box if you want to copy that link, or if you just want to send me a private message or whatever, phone call, email. I'm pretty easy to find. That would be awesome. And I'll probably send it out. Well, I will send it out on email too, just as a follow-up. Would y'all like the recording as well? Would anyone be interested in the recording if I sent it out on an email? Okay, all right. Well, I do have it on recorded, so if anyone needs it or wants it, just let me know. I look forward to talking with y'all and seeing you again. And again, if you don't mind putting something in the group that you really good value from the workshop, and that would be awesome. And hopefully you will contact me and I will see y'all soon. All right, listen, have a great day. Thank you so much for coming too, by the way. I think everyone's muted. All right.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ed. All right. Have a good day. Bye.